Hi, thank you for joining me.
My greatest pleasure.
So what's your full name?
Rae Shalett,
What year were you born?
1946.
Can you describe for me what was it like growing up?
It was a very simple life. I grew up with my first 2.5 years of life. I grew up in a house with my grandmother and aunt and my parents and my older brother.
If you could change one thing in your life, what do you think it would be?
If I could change one thing, I would probably change any arguing I did with my parents or with friends and try and be a nicer person.
What's your job?
I'm the executive director of Temple Sinai in New Orleans.
So what do you do as the executive director?
I am responsible for all the activities in the building and all the financial records of the synagogue and all the history records of the synagogue. Anyone who books a function at the synagogue has to go through me. I set up all the Onek Shabbats. I set up all the activities at the synagogue. I make sure that there's no conflict in activities. I rent the auditorium when necessary or when someone wants to rent it. I coordinate all the bar and bat mitzvahs and weddings. Basically, I do everything, all the activities in the synagogue.
Did your family immigrate from another country?
My grandparents did. All of my grandparents immigrated from another country. My father's parents immigrated from Russia, and my mother's parents immigrated from Poland.
Did you grow up in a Russian and Poland environment?
I grew up in what was called a Yiddish environment. My father's parents did not live in New Orleans. They lived in Boston. But both sets of I didn't know my grandfather on my mother's side because he died when my mother was 17. But all three of the grandparents I knew spoke very little English. They all spoke Yiddish. When I was in 6th grade, my grandmother and aunt bought a house with my mother and father and brother and I. We all lived together in a larger home. And my grandmother kept kosher, even though the rest of us didn't. And my grandmother, who was an incredible cook, and baker especially, would bake and cook, and she would freeze a lot of stuff, and she would mark it, but it was marked in Hebrew. Well, it was in Yiddish, but Yiddish was written in Hebrew. And after she died, there was a lot of food in the freezer, and until we could open it up, we didn't know what it was.
That's funny. So you told me that you were close with your aunt and your grandma. Were you close with your parents?
I was very close to my parents. They were very, very important in my life. I don't ever remember a day of my life growing up that I didn't see both my parents.
Let's talk about your dad. What did he have? What job did he have?
My dad worked for his brother-in-law in a lumber company, and he was an executive in the office in the lumber company. That's not what his formal training was, though. He was trained, before he went in the Army, he trained as a hairdresser, but he really never pursued that. Once he married my mom after World War II, he went to work for her older brother, who was quite a bit older than her.
What did he do in World War II?
He was an airplane mechanic. He was in a country called Guam, and it was a holding country for a lot of airplanes in the Pacific.
Was your dad someone who was really tough? Or
no, he was as gentle as he can be and as soft as he could be. There's actually nothing tough about my dad, other than he was a very, very hard worker. What was the most important thing in my dad's life was his family.
Was he strict?
No, not at all. But the man, in his own, because he wasn't, and because he was so loving, that demanded a lot of respect.
Thank you.